Kyle Busch will join Spire Motorsports for select NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races with Spire Motorsports in 2026 and could be a potential candidate for their Cup Series program for 2027. And Keselowski is officially cleared to run the 2026 Daytona 500. What's going on, guys? This is Daniel and welcome back to another video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Williams' 2026 Optim scheme that we'll see in select races throughout the 2026 season, including in the opener at Daytona. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. I do like the colors on the car. You got the orange look to it. I think it's solid. Looking forward to the racetrack at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Sieg's 2026 Miami Hooch scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona. It's definitely a different look. You got a Miami Vice look to the car, if you ask me. I think it looks okay. It's an interesting look for the RSS car. It looks all right. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chandler Smith's 2026 Trophy Catch scheme that we'll see in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series opener at Daytona. I think the truck looks pretty all right in my opinion. There's some things I don't like. I don't love the green color on it, to be honest. I think it could be a little better, but good to see a new sponsor in trucks. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Alex Abay's 2026 Liberty Brew scheme that we'll see in the O'Reilly Auto Parts race at Watkins Glen. Car looks pretty good in my opinion. Got the American look to the car. I think it actually looks pretty good with the Liberty look to it. It looks pretty solid. Looking forward to the racetrack at Watkins Glen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is J.J. Ille's 2026 Bill Work scheme that'll try to qualify for the Daytona 500. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. It's one of the better NY racing schemes I've seen up to this point so far. The colors actually work really well. They pop solidly on this one. Looking forward to the racetrack at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tanner Gray's 2026 Black's Tire scheme that we'll see in multiple NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races throughout the 2026 year. Scheme looks very similar to one they had in 2025, which I thought last year's scheme was okay. This one's very similar to that. This one's alright. It's not the most spectacular scheme I've seen from Tricon Garage. It does look okay, but it definitely could be a better one for sure. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Christian Eckes' 2026 Columbia Bay scheme that we'll see in 4 or 5 NASCAR Craftsman truck races in 2026. Looks kind of similar to the Chase Briscoe scheme and a Haley Deegan scheme that I think she's going to run this year. This one looks alright. It's good to see it in trucks. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sam Mayer's 2026 Audible scheme that will be in most NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series races in 2026. I think it looks alright in my opinion. It's a very similar one they had in 2025. I think there's some good things on it. The black, the green works pretty well on this one. I think Haas Factory Team did a good job on this scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Luke Fenhaus' 2026 Get Jobber scheme that we'll see in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series opener at Daytona for Hettinger Racing. I'm not the biggest fan of this scheme, to be honest. I don't think the colors on this one work as well as other schemes. I think there's some things they could have done. They do a good job on the utilization of the sponsorship placement, but it certainly could be better. It's an alright looking scheme, but I don't think it's the best looking car I've seen on the racetrack. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey LaJoie's 2026 Bill scheme that we'll see in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series with Henderson Motorsports. This was kind of similar to some of the cars we've seen from Corey LaJoie in the past when he, of course, drove for Spire Motorsports. They will have an alliance with Spire Motorsports, by the way, in the truck opener. I think it's alright. It's definitely a solid-looking truck for Henderson. I think Corey could also win the truck opener as well. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Mason Maggio's 2026 Success Unlocked scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona. Car looks alright in my opinion, not the most spectacular. It does have some good look to it, and it's good to see that they'll be sponsoring Mason Maggio in the opener at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chandler Smith's 2026 Quick Tie scheme that'll try to qualify for the NASCAR Cup Series race for the Daytona 500. Good to see Quick Tie continue working with Chandler Smith. It actually looks alright. Looks similar to the one he had in the Truck Series with Front Row. I think there's some good colors on this one for sure, and it's a solid looking scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at, and final paint scheme we're taking a look at, is Gio Ruggiero's 2026 First Auto Group scheme that we'll see in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series opener at Daytona. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. I think Joe Gibbs Racing could have done a better job. Not as strong as the one we've seen in the past from organizations like Tricon that will be working with Gio this year once again. I think there's some good look to it. It's a solid looking car and car in my opinion. Looking forward to the racetrack this year, and we'll see how he can do it as he tries to make the Daytona 500. I think he's got a good chance and opportunity, certainly, to make the Daytona 500 this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shell. As it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today that Shell will give any customer who uses its fuel rewards program at its gas stations, I believe around $22, and has addition to win a giveaway as well with Shell. This is a really cool opportunity to see some NASCAR and certain partnerships working with the Shell company. Of course, Shell is associated with Pennzoil, which does work very closely with Team Penske and is a majority sponsor for Joey Logano throughout each and every year. We've already seen the primary car at this point, but I love seeing this. I think more of the sponsorization and all the sponsor stuff we see, you want to see more of that to help the sport grow long term. So I think something like this is really solid and really awesome to see for sure. And getting involved and having customers get the chance and opportunity to use this fuel reward system, I think it's a really great thing in my opinion, and great to see they'll have an opportunity to see this out throughout the year at multiple gas stations associated with Pennzoil and multiple other gas stations associated with that. Pretty awesome stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fastenal. As it was announced earlier today, or yesterday I should say, that Fastenal will move the blue sponsorship they've had for many years in NASCAR with Chip Ganassi Racing and RFK Racing. They'll be switching from the blue sponsorship and move to the bodyguard sponsorship for all three drivers at RFK Racing in 2026. They'll sponsor Chris Buescher, Ryan Preece, and Brad Keselowski throughout the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season and sponsor for a lot of races throughout the year. For a long time, the iconic blue Fastenal scheme has been around, whether it was with Chip Ganassi Racing in 2008 or working with the team of RFK Racing, it doesn't matter. It's going to be sad to see that sponsorship no longer around working with the team and organization going into the year. It's a shame because I really love the iconic blue look. But also the bodyguard look, I think it's not as strong as the Fastenal iconic look we've seen for many years. But I do think it's good to see if Fastenal is working towards something like this and having a different sponsorship utilization for. I think it's certainly something that I like for sure. And I think it's a really exciting direction they're going in regards to that. I'm very happy that they're not very happy to see the Fastenal look of the old blue look going away. But I do like they're going a different direction and staying in, so at least they're not leaving the sport. I think that's a good thing for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spectrum. As it was announced earlier today, that Spectrum will sponsor Carson Hocevar in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. They'll sponsor Carson for 12 NASCAR Cup Series races this year. This includes the Daytona 500 this week, where he'll be looking to win his first Daytona 500 in the number 77 machine. They will also sponsor him, I think, maybe at Homestead at the end of the year. They're also going to sponsor him at Gateway, and I think one of the Kansas races in addition to that. This is the first time that Charter and Spectrum have been in the sport in many, many years. They, of course, have worked, I believe, with Carson Hocevar before, but they, of course, were sponsored for Greg Biffle for many, many years at Roush. They also worked with Carl Edwards many years ago, and also worked, I think, with AJ Allmendinger and Elliott Sadler at one point when they were over at multiple different organizations, like with the Abraham Gillette team at one point and the Richard Petty Motorsports organization. I think it's exciting to see if you have a company like Spectrum coming back to the sport. I think it's very important for something like this to happen, to see the sport grow in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's great they'll be working with Carson Hocevar for quite a few NASCAR Cup Series races this year. And I got to say also, I think the paint scheme for this car looks phenomenal and really, really good. So I'm really happy about that. I'm glad to see that they'll be in the sport working with Carson. I think it's great for the sport to have a sponsor like this. And I think it's good they'll be working with Carson for a lot of NASCAR Cup races in 2026. Their main focus is Carson. They'll be looking to run really strong, have maybe a win with that sponsorship later this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Freedom Warranty. As it was announced yesterday, that Freedom Warranty will continue sponsoring the Freedom Racing Enterprises organization in 2026 and will be the major sponsor for Spencer Boyd in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this year. Freedom Warranty has been associated with Spencer Boyd for a very long time. They actually were on the truck that he ran when he won his first Truck Series race at Talladega back in 2019. So this partnership has been around for a very long time in many, many years. And I'm glad to see that this partnership will be continuing in 2026. The paint scheme you saw in the post, I think that's the paint scheme they're running. I don't think they're changing anything up for 2026. So I think that's a great thing to see, is that they're not changing that up going into the year and going into the season, because I don't want to see things change up, especially if they're working. You don't want to fix anything that's broken, because I think the Freedom Warranty truck looks good. Good to see that Freedom Warranty will continue working with the Freedom Racing team in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Celsius. As it was announced yesterday that Celsius will sponsor 2311 Racing and become an official partner at the 2311 Racing organization in 2026. They'll be becoming also partnered with Corey Heim throughout the 2026 season, and they will sponsor him in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Daytona, not for the Daytona 500, but the Summer Daytona races, which is one of the 12 scheduled races for Corey Heim in 2026. It's exciting to see an energy drink company working with someone like Corey Heim. They work with a lot of different drivers in NASCAR currently at the moment. They do work with, I believe, AJ Allmendinger right now. They also are working with Justin Haley. I think there may have some association at some point with other drivers, maybe Daniel Dye at one point, who we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode. They associate with Tony Breidinger in the Truck Series, and they also, I believe, still have association with William Byron. But this is one of the bigger moves that I've seen from the Celsius brand on the NASCAR side, and I think it's great to see they're back working with the 2311 Racing organization, and pretty excited to see they're going over there to work with Corey Heim. Having another sponsor to work with Corey, who could be in the running to take over on the 2311 racing cars in 2027. Picking up sponsors is going to be a big deal. So great to see this nonetheless. I'm happy to see Corey Heim has a new sponsor. We'll see how Corey ends up doing with that sponsorship and see if he maybe can go to victory lane at Daytona later this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Wendy's. As it was announced earlier today and reported by Joseph Strigley that Wendy's will continue sponsoring Trackhouse Racing in the 2026 NASCAR Cup season. They're going to sponsor Ross Chastain, Connor Zilch, and Shane Van Gisbergen all for one race each in the 2026 year. Wendy's became a sponsor of the Trackhouse Racing organization, I believe, in 2024. They were on SVG's car at one point, I'm pretty sure. And they did work with SVG in a few races, especially in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series with the number 97 Wendy's car with the College Racing team. And they have still not been able to win a race, I believe, with that Wendy's sponsorship at this point. They're going to sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I think Connor will be at a race in the middle of the year. And I believe Ross Chastain will also have a race in the early to middle portion of the season. Maybe Chicagoland, but I can't remember from the press release they had. But I think it's really good that Wendy's is back with Trackhouse Racing. Obviously, WeatherTech, it looks like they're sticking around, but they've lost some sponsorship going into the year with Coca-Cola and a couple other big companies. And I'm not sure what's going on with some of the other sponsors they have currently at the moment right now. But I'm glad to see they'll be continuing to work in the sport. And I think it's great that they're working with the Trackhouse team once again. I'm very excited to see what the cars are going to look like, because I think they'll probably give us some really good cars this upcoming year. And I do have to say that it's great to see Wendy's continuing on, and good to see they'll be working once again with this team and program in the 2026 NASCAR season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jason White. As it was announced yesterday that Jason White will drive the number 2 for Team Rayum in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series opener at Daytona International Speedway. Jason White is expected to make a lot of starts with this organization throughout the 2026 year. And this is not the Canadian Jason White that, of course, actually the American Jason White, who was at one point driving a 23 or 24 truck many years ago. This is the Canadian Jason White who nearly won the ARCA opener back in 2023 that Grave Van also went on to pick up the win at. I'm not expecting Jason White to be a major factor and contender with this team and organization, because while I do expect that Team Rayum is going to be getting some upgrades, there's been a lot of rumblings and rumors, especially with Luke Baldwin going over there, who could long-term end up in the front row camp in the future. They're expected to be potentially getting some upgrades from front row, so maybe Jason White could show some really good stuff in this race. But realistically, the goal is to just make sure this truck does get in the race. I don't believe the 2 truck has a lot of owner's points going in the event, so I think that's the big concern if you're a fan of this driver going in. We'll see what Jason White can do, and we'll see if he can make the event. I think he's got a decent chance and opportunity. You've got some provisionals for the Colic trucks with the Ram program, so that might help Jason White. It might benefit him in a really big way. We'll see what happens there. Nonetheless, good opportunity for Jason, and we'll see what he can do as he looks to be very fast, really strong, really competitive with this organization at Daytona as he looks to make the show and make the field in this event. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jason Kitzmiller. As it was reported by Declan Wayman yesterday that Jason Kitzmiller will attempt to make his NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series debut this weekend or a couple days from now at Daytona International Speedway. he will drive a second truck for one of the organizations he owns and one of the teams he associated with, and that is CR7 Motorsports. He will drive the number 97 for CR7 Motorsports and look to be teammates of Grant Enfinger in this event. Jason Kitzmiller, I believe back in 2021 or 2022, attempted to make his NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series debut in a second truck for the CR7 Motorsports team. Unfortunately, did have some issues, I believe, during practice and qualifying and failed to qualify for the event. Jason Kitzmiller's son, of course, will be back racing in the ARCA East, and I believe the main ARCA Series in 2026. His son went on to win the ARCA East Championship, and Jason's main focus this year is going to be racing in the main ARCA Series in 2026. But there's a great opportunity for Jason if he can make the field. There's a lot of really strong competition. You're going to have a lot of drivers going home. You could have up to 8 drivers going home, or maybe as little as 4 or 5 with the provisionals coming into play. So we'll see what he can do if they can bring the pace and speed in practice coming up the next day or so. I think then Jason has a chance and opportunity to run up front and do some good things. So we'll see what Jason can do. He's a decent super speedway guy from the ARCA side of things. So we'll see how he does, and we'll see if he can perform very well. Good opportunity. We'll see what Jason can do at Daytona in the Truck Series opener coming up here very, very soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. As there was a report by Bob Pockrass in the entry list yesterday that Carson Hocevar will be running in all 3 NASCAR events in 2026 at Daytona, as it was confirmed by Bob Pockrass that Carson Hocevar will drive the 42 car for Young's Motorsports in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series opener at Daytona International Speedway. Carson will be looking to do something that Ross Chastain tried to do, I believe, back in 2019 or 2020 when Ross, I believe, ran all 3 races in both of those Daytona 500s. When I look at Carson Hocevar's chances with this team and organization, he has probably got an okay chance. Young's Motorsports, they're not the fastest organization in the world. They're going to have Ryan Ellis driving the main car in the 2026 year. It seems like they're backing away from their truck program going into the year to put full focus on their O'Reilly Auto Parts program, which I think for that team does make a lot of sense. And I bringing a guy in like Carson Hocevar, who will be the only NASCAR Cup Series driver that is expected to run this event, I think that is a really important thing that shows that we're really focused on trying to make this program really strong and really, really good. And I certainly do think that Carson Hocevar has a really solid chance and a really good opportunity to potentially contend for a top 10 or top 15. And it wouldn't be surprised if he at least wins one of the races this weekend, because I think he's going to have a fast and pretty good car when we get down to Daytona for trucks and Cup. I'm just a little concerned about the Young's Motorsports opportunity if he can sweep the weekend, if he can do it. But Carson will look to run really well, complete all the miles. I think for him, that's the most important thing. He'll look to get that done. We'll see what he can do, and we'll see if Carson can have a chance. He'll probably make the show more than likely, because the 42 car will have RCR and ECR engines, which I think will help that organization a big way. A great opportunity for him to drive for this team and program in 2026, at least in a one-off event. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about NASCAR's Hell Yeah campaign. Now, many of you probably saw the new ad after the Super Bowl concluded on Sunday night. There was a new advertisement that came out to basically prep for the 2026 NASCAR season and also prepare for the 2026 Daytona 500, which of course kicks off this week. Obviously, a lot of very interesting things that came out. Scott Eastwood was a narrator who did a really good job kind of talking about all the major things. You had Cletus McFarland and Carson Hocevar, who, of course, were doing a burnout in the 3 Dale truck. And then, of course, you have Marshawn Lynch and Bubba Wallace, who recreated the famous Friday scene. And also Kyle Larson doing a burnout, and Caitlin Larson, his wife, basically shotgunning a beer, which is something that she's known to do. And you had a lot of really interesting things that came from that. And for the most part, I think the advertising they did was really, really good. But it seems like NASCAR is taking this thing very, very seriously, because yesterday, or actually earlier today, they were able to complete a Guinness World Record. They attempted a Guinness World Record today for basically having the loudest barrier, actually the loudest billboard in the history of Guinness World Records. And it was confirmed by Guinness World Record, the people that run that group over there, they did confirm that NASCAR was able to beat that Guinness World Record with a next-gen engine. Say what you want to say about NASCAR and some of the marketing things they've been doing. This is an area where I think they have struggled for the most part until now. Number one, they're finally finding an identity and finally finding a true brand to stick to. Are they going to go and do all things all, or they want to go to the direction of basically going back to the southern roots, among other things, and going this direction while, yes, having billboards in New York, you want to focus on that core audience. And it seems like NASCAR is focusing on that. The true American roots, the unapologetic thing. That's what I think NASCAR, in the direction I think NASCAR truly needed to go to. And I respect that they're going toward that direction at this point, because I think for the sport, you need to commit to a side that you're going to go to and focus on that direction and stay on the marketing side. In my opinion, doing the thing that's worked for a long time is probably the best direction to go with at this point. So I'm really happy they've picked inside and gone a direction they wanted to go. I like they're going this direction because to me, it makes the most sense to go to a very easy direction that you can have a lot of success with. And I like the direction they've went to. I think it's awesome, and I'm glad to see they finally picked the side and direction to go to potentially have some success. I think it could be something that's very successful for NASCAR going forward into the near and not so distant future, and it's good marketing as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Nick Lights. As it was announced yesterday morning that Nick Lights will be attempting to make his Tricon debut this weekend in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series opener at Daytona in a couple days, as he will drive the number 5 truck for Tricon Garage this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. This is definitely a big surprise that Nick Lights is getting this chance and opportunity, but I think this is an amazing opportunity for Nick. Nick, in my opinion, has never had the chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel of a good truck or a good car. If you look at his career, yes, he doesn't have the greatest statistics, right? But you have to look at the organizations that he's driven for. He's driven for organizations, trucks like Young's Motorsports and Team Rayum. And then in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, his best organization was a one-off with RSS Racing in the 38 car, or the 28, that Kyle Sieg ended up driving for, because you had Ryan Sieg driving in substitution for Sam Mayer, who of course got suspended after Martinsville in the incident with Jeb Burton. You had Kyle Sieg driving the main 39. Outside of that, we've never seen Nick get a chance and opportunity like this. And I think this is an amazing and great opportunity for Nick, because the Tricon team, they, of course, are defending winners at Daytona, but their Super Speedway program has actually been really good. They won 2 of the 3 Super Speedway races last year, including the Talladega race that Gio Ruggiero was able to pick up his first career Truck Series win. Now, do I realistically think that Nick Lights can go out there and win the event? I'm not expecting Nick to be the favorite to win without question, but I think a top 10, top 15 is certainly possible. And my other question is this a one-off for Nick in 2026, or is he going to make more starts with this team and program? Because I want to see what Nick can do if he gets another chance and opportunity. I think Nick has the talent. I think Nick has the capabilities, and I certainly would love to see him make more starts with the team and program. Because I think I would love to see what he can do outside of a super speedway. Maybe go to a track like Bristol or not Las Vegas, but Charlotte or something like that if they can get him behind the wheel. I think that'd be a great opportunity for him if he does maybe in the near future get that. So we'll see what happens down the road for him. Nonetheless, happy for Nick and glad to see he's getting a chance and opportunity. Congrats on getting the opportunity, Nick, on getting an opportunity to race for the Tricon team. We'll see what he does in the opener at Daytona. I think he'll have a solid shot and opportunity to show some pretty good, fast, and competitive speed coming up here really, really soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Daniel Dye. As it was announced yesterday after the Nick Sanchez announcement, which we're going to get to here in just a short little bit, was announced that AM Racing will have a second car in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series for select events in 2026. And they announced as well that Daniel Dye is going to be the driver behind the wheel. Daniel Dye will join AM Racing on a part-time stint in 2026, driving a number 52 car for the team and organization. This is definitely a really big surprise, considering the fact that Daniel Dye will be driving full-time for Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this year. I'm definitely surprised to see him getting this chance and opportunity with AM Racing. But obviously it makes a lot of sense. Champion Contender, they announced recently, will be back with the team and program this upcoming year, actually working with Daniel Dye, and I think in a few races in the Truck Series as well, potentially as an associate sponsor. And they wanted to continue working with Daniel Dye. As I think maybe a big reason why this happened to begin with is because of the fact that there's no connection with Chevrolet anymore for Kaulig, and there's no manufacturer support from other manufacturers. Now, what are my expectations for Daniel Dye? He'll run Daytona and some other races throughout the year. I think Daniel Dye will show some potential in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. I'm not thinking he's going to be the favorite to win without question. I certainly think he'll have some difficulties with the AM Racing team, who will have 2 cars, and that might kind of stretch the team a little bit on budget, because they're not going to have Cole Raz in a team, it sounds like, this year at this point. But I think for Daniel Dye, having the prior experience of racing a full year, being a veteran in the series, I think that definitely is going to help him in a solid and pretty big way, hopefully. And I think that there is a chance we could see some competitive and really strong speed for him going into this season. I really hope he can show some great things with this team and program. I'm happy that he's getting the opportunity to drive for the team and program for select races. I hope that he can show some good stuff in trucks as well for the long-term future, especially if Kaulig Racing does bring back their O'Reilly Auto Parts program in the near future. We'll see what happens on that front. Good opportunity for him, though, and we'll see what Daniel Dye can do. I think it's a good chance for him. We'll see what he can do, and we'll see how he can perform this weekend at Daytona and the other races throughout the 2026 NASCAR O'Reilly season, and also in the Truck Series as well with the Kaulig Racing team. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Taylor Gray. As it was announced earlier today that Taylor Gray will be back with Tricon Garage for select NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races in 2026. His first race will be at Daytona International Speedway and will drive the All-Star truck, the number one in the opener at Daytona International Speedway. Of course, Taylor Gray's main focus will be racing full-time in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in 2026 in the number 54 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. But it's great to see him back making select starts this year. He did not make, I don't believe he made any starts in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2025. And I will say he did do pretty well in trucks the last year or so, came close to winning a few Truck Series races the last time he raced in the event. I mentioned this earlier with Nick Lights. We do know that Tricon Garage has a really solid super speedway program, and I think Taylor Gray's super speedways and trucks, and even the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series this year, he did show some flashes and did show some brilliance. And I think he could be a potential factor and a potential favorite to beat some of those big names. You're going to have a lot of really big names running this truck race. You're going to have Cletus McFarland running the event, Tony Stewart. You're going to have other big names like Michael McDowell, Carson Osavar, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Corey LaJoie, John Hernimacek, Travis Estrada, and other big names competing full-time in the series. They're going to give him a hard time for him to have a chance to win. But I think Taylor's definitely certainly capable. And again, I think this is a really great opportunity for Taylor Gray to be back with Tricon Garage for select truck events, because I do think he's actually going to be pretty competitive. I do think he's going to have a shot to go to victory lane, and I think that the team will bring the pace and speed. Jeremy Donnelly, who was a crew chief of one of the trucks last year, who we'll talk about a video coming out in the near future, I think he's going to do a really strong job working as a crew chief. He's almost won race before with other different drivers, so I think that you could see the one truck show some really solid and really good things. So we'll see what Taylor Gray can do. Happy to see him back in trucks for a couple races this year, including at Daytona. Once again, I do expect him to show some solid pace and really good speed. I think he'll be a guy you're going to have to watch out for in this event. A great opportunity and a solid shot to work with this team and organization for select events in trucks, and good opportunity to work with Tricon to be teammates with other drivers throughout the 2026 NASCAR season. Good to see Taylor get a shot to be in trucks once again. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Minnie Tyrell. Now we all know, of course, Minnie Tyrell will be racing full-time in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series for Kaulig Racing in 2026 after winning the Gong Show opportunity and winning the Ram Racer to Seat by scoring the most points in the event. A couple weeks prior to this show finally being done and everything being confirmed will be in trucks, he revealed, speaking about Pockers, that he only has a one-year deal with the Kaulig Racing Ram team in 2026. And he says he wants to make the best of it and make the best opportunity with this team and organization in 2026. Obviously, this is an amazing opportunity for Minnie. I think that this is a really great chance to be in the 14 truck in 2026, because when you look at the Ram side of things and the Dodge side of things long term, let's say he has a phenomenal year with this team and program and puts together a strong year. This could lead down the road to him being a potential candidate for a Cup Series program, especially if Dodge decides, hey, we want to go Cup Series racing in the near future. I could certainly see them looking at that and bringing their team up the Cup in the not-so-distant future down the road. And I think that you have to look at Minnie as someone who could be one of those prime candidates for something like that in the near future. But obviously it all depends on his performance. Realistically, for Minnie going into the year, I think he will have a very solid season with the Kaulig team. I don't think he will be a make the chase this year. I think it's going to be tough for him, especially since he's never made a start in truck competition before, though he will have experience of racing in the ARCA race at Daytona. Someone who's never raced in trucks before, sometimes it can take some time to get acclimated. He's never raced in something similar to this. So I think that's one thing that could be something to watch out for. Even though he did get a chance to test it, I'm just not sure if many will be a factor to make the chase, but he will be in that conversation throughout the year. And I got to say, it's exciting to see someone earn the right opportunity. I compare his story to very similar to another driver that's teammate of his, Brendan Butterbean Queen. Brendan is another driver, came from the short track scene, who nearly had to quit his career many, many years ago and almost had to give it up. And he then got a chance a few years back, and of course now is racing full-time for Kaulig's program, and had a dominant year in the ARCA Menard Series last year, winning 7 or 8 races, and just put together a phenomenal and great year in that series, respectively. And I think for many, going to be fun to see what he can do this year with Kaulig. And I believe all 4 full-time drivers are on 1-year contracts with their teams. You obviously have Daniel Dye, who is on a 1-year deal, though he's got sponsorship. Brennan's on a 1-year deal, but I know that Kaulig and the team up and Cup are looking at him right now. And you have Justin Haley, who I think is in the future going to take over one of the rides from Kaulig in the Cup Series down the road once Dodge and Ram decide to make the move up in the future. But nonetheless, I think it's great for many. Good to see him in this series, and I think we'll have a solid shot and opportunity to show some potential good things. We'll see what he can do, and we'll see if Mini can show some speed. Great opportunity to work with the Kaulig Ram program in trucks in 26. I think he'll be pretty fast and show some great things in this series with a team that I think is going to put faith in him, and I think you're going to be confident in him to show what he can be capable of doing in the near and not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, Dale Jr. recently was asked about drivers from the Formula One side of things and other motorsports they would like to see come over and try out NASCAR in the near future. And there were 2 names that came to Junior Motorsport and Dale Jr.'s head. The first one is 4-time Formula One champion Max Verstappen. Now, Max Verstappen in the past has stated he's not fully interested in racing in NASCAR currently at the moment, with his focus of Red Bull at the moment and the Ford side of things. He probably wouldn't go to Chevrolet if it came to NASCAR, but it seems like they're not the only one going after him. Max Verstappen has been expressed interest from the track outside of things, the Red Bull connection. I know that Connor Zoltra's over there spending some time with Max and racing against each other and some of the Red Bull stuff happening over in Europe. So maybe Max Verstappen down the road would decide to change his mind. The other name, and this one does not surprise me, Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo had the iconic number 3 in honoring of Dale Earnhardt in Formula One. And then, of course, Daniel Ricciardo is someone who's in the past expressed interest in racing in NASCAR. Now, when it comes to Daniel Ricciardo, he basically has retired from full-time racing at this point. And he's also part of the Ford Ambassador program currently at the moment. That doesn't mean, though, that I would rule out Daniel Ricciardo coming back. I remember the rumors last year at one point for some of those accounts saying that maybe Daniel Ricciardo was going to be interested in maybe running the Daytona 500, and it seemed like the deal was getting close to be finalized for Daniel Ricciardo to drive a Junior Motorsports car. But obviously that did not end up happening. Instead, it would end up being Justin Allgaier who would get that opportunity, who would go on to make the Daytona 500 with the Junior Motorsports team and that organization. I think it'd be amazing to see some more drivers come over. To me, there's a couple other names I like to see outside of Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo. One name I'd love to see is Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso, there's a lot of talk about trying to bring him over to the Indy 500 once again right now and do another Indy 500 run with McLaren. I think it'd be great to see Fernando Alonso come over and do some NASCAR stuff. He's done pretty much every other motorsport outside of motorcycle racing and NASCAR. Why not come over and do a one-off at this point? I think he'd be open to the challenge. I think he could be pretty competitive. Another name is Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton, I believe, is either on a contract year or in the second of a multi-year deal with Ferrari currently at the moment. I think it'd be great to see Lewis Hamilton come over and do some NASCAR stuff in the near future as well, because I think it'd be fun to see different drivers in different motorsports come out and try different things, because I think we could see some potential success from a team if they could bring someone in like this. And I do hope it happens, really. I would definitely love to see it for sure. And I'd love to see multiple drivers from other motorsports come over, like a Valentino Rossi down the road, or some other drivers get the chance. We know Jenson Button might be coming back to race NASCAR in the future as well. So we'll see what happens down the road. But I want to see some drivers in different motorsports come try it out, because I think they could all have success and show some great things if they get the chance. We'll see if, in fact, there's some potential for something like this to happen, where we could see guys like Max Verstappen and Ricciardo come to the sport in the near future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the future of NASCAR scheduling. Now, we talked a little bit about this story on the channel yesterday in a big video, but there's been a lot of talk about potential future plans for the NASCAR schedule, even going as far as 2027. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday, that NASCAR is exploring a couple new venues for 2027 and beyond. And there also are plans for Talladega renovations for 2027. Now, Mike Ford did confirm one thing in regards to the 2027 schedule, either on Holler Talk or something else very recently. It sounds like that Homestead will be the season finale for NASCAR once again in 2027. There's been a lot of talk about a potential rotating finale for the NASCAR season. I'm not sure if this is just a one-year gap where they're going to have another year at Homestead after the first potential success year that we might end up seeing at the track. Or my theory is maybe because of the fact you don't have the one race championship, maybe that's something they're putting on hold at this point. But my theory is you have a lot of cities and a lot of areas that are really expressed interest on getting the finale. There's been talk about Las Vegas Motor Speedway in the next couple years hosting the season finale. I've heard Nashville's one area that's been looking to be interested. Maybe Nashville Super Speedway could be a potential season finale track down the road. I think there's other tracks that are looking at that at this point. But talk about the Talladega renovations. I think when you think of Talladega, didn't they just have an update like a decade ago? It really wasn't that long ago that Talladega had renovations, but I guess, especially with ISC and NASCAR running the show at a lot of these tracks right now, they probably do want to put some upgrades in the track to make the experience for the fans a lot better. And I think that's not a bad thing if you want to make this fan experience a lot better for the fans that are going to races and who are especially paying for them. As for 2027 with the NASCAR schedule, there's a lot of things to look at for 2027. I know NASCAR is looking at maybe wanting to bring back the Chicago Street Course. They really wanted to bring it back for 2026, but they couldn't do it because it seemed like there was a lot of uninterest, especially with how long it took to get a deal basically confirmed. It wasn't happening for 27, so they went to Chicagoland as an alternate plan. NASCAR said they may down the road be open to having 2 races in the Chicago market, especially with how big the Chicago market is. It may be oversaturated with that, but that's something that I think NASCAR is going to look at. Then you have Mexico City. NASCAR did not race in Mexico City in 2026 after, I think, a pretty solid first year at the track, albeit there were some issues with the travel and logistics among other things as well. But I think we'd love to see a race down there in Mexico City once again in 2027. And I think there's some things that would have to happen to make it happen at this point. But also a big focus for that track is getting Formula One to continue being there for many, many years down the road. I think that's one thing they're focused on, is trying to continue to keep Formula One around there. And also trying to convert IndyCar. There was a lot of talk that IndyCar was going to go over here in 2026 to Mexico. That obviously did not end up happening, which I found to be incredibly unfortunate, because I certainly do think that there could have been a ton of success if they found a way for that event to happen. But like I said, it unfortunately did not end up happening on the schedule for 2027, which again was definitely disappointing. But I think it's good to see in some instances that things are kind of starting to happen at this point, and I just hope we continue to see good things happen long-term for the future. So I would love to see more racing on the schedule, more tracks added, and I hope we do get some more racing at some of these tracks in the near and not-so-distant future, and new tracks added, maybe going to New Smyrna, new maybe Five Flags. That's something NASCAR could look going towards to, and we'll see if they go toward that direction in the near and not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As it was announced last night that Kyle Busch will be joining Spire Motorsports in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series for select truck events in 2026. He will drive the number 7 truck for 8 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races in 2026. This will include Atlanta Motor Speedway next week. He will also run at Charlotte Motor Speedway in May. He will also run some other races like in Bristol early in the year. He will also run, I believe, at Richmond near the end of the season as well. And he's going to run a lot of their big events throughout the 2026 NASCAR season, including at Nashville Super Speedway. We talked about the story on the channel for multiple different reasons, and we'll get to 2027 speculation here in just a short little bit. There's been a lot of rumors around what Kyle Busch exactly was going to be doing in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this year. There are rumors that Kyle Busch maybe was going to do some stuff with Nice Motorsports and maybe drive the 4 truck. That obviously did not end up happening, unfortunately, on that front. But Kyle Busch said it was confirmed he'd be with Spire for 8 events. Kyle Busch said he's really happy to be with this program once again. And of course, Kyle Busch has had prior association with this team and program in the past. So it's not the most shocking and surprising thing to see Kyle Busch back in the series once again with the Spire team. Last year, 2025, was definitely a little bit of a struggle for Kyle for his normal standards. He didn't have the same pace and speed, but I think Spire Motorsports last year, the Truck Series program, took a big step back. They only won 4 races last year in the Truck Series altogether, and 3 of their wins came from Cup Series drivers, that being Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and Carson Hocevar at Kansas Speedway. And only other driver got a win was Raja Karuf. Now, One thing to note is a sponsorship with HendrickCars.com. HendrickCars.com is a Rick Hendrick sponsorship. And you start thinking about long-term toward 2027, you're thinking, okay, especially with the sponsorship coming on to work with Kyle Busch, I think that this could lead to long-term future things where Kyle Busch could be in potentially in the running in the near future to go to Spire Motorsports, maybe in the Cup Series. I think that's something that's being looked at this point currently at the moment. I would love to see that for Kyle in the future because Kyle Busch is in a contract year with Richard Childress Racing right now, and you have a lot of things happening. You've got drivers in contract years. You've got Daniel Suarez in a contract year at Spire. You got Michael McDowell also in a contract year with Spire. I think that's one thing to look at is when we get to talk about Busch and Reddick being candidates for the Spire team and Cup, I think that's one thing that could potentially be down the road, and this could lead to Kyle Busch getting starts because I would imagine you'll see some other drivers behind the wheel. This also pretty much completes the lineup for Spire for 2026 in some areas. We know Michael McDowell is driving that 7 truck this upcoming weekend at Daytona. Also, I believe Carson Osar is making 13 starts in the truck series this year, including at Daytona and some other events as well. And then, of course, you have other drivers expected like Tristan McKee. There's rumors there's going to be a third potential part-time truck in 2026. Maybe guys like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, maybe Tristan McKee, Roger Croup make a few starts throughout the year with this team and with this program. But I'm happy for Kyle that he will get the chance and opportunity to be with Spire for some events this year because I think that he'll have a chance to win. If I had to make a realistic prediction for Kyle Busch in 2026, realistically, I think Kyle Busch will contend for a few wins this year. I think he'll have a good chance and opportunity to get at least 1 or 2 victories, which will continue to add toward the number, which he has 67 currently at the moment. He could get to 70 by the end of the year, especially with Corey Heim not being in the series this year full-time. I think it'll be more wide open. I think Spire, especially downsizing their truck program, will have more potential speed in NASCAR truck competition in the 2026 year and season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Nick Sanchez. As it was announced yesterday that Nick Sanchez has found a ride for the 2026 NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series season. He will drive the number 25 car full-time for AM Racing in 2026 and have backing from support through the 2026 year. This is a tale of 2 stories. Obviously, we talked about this, but Nick Sanchez lost his ride with Big Machine Racing at the end of 2025 when it was announced a couple days before Christmas that Patrick Story-Poli would be replacing Nick Sanchez at the organization of Big Machine Racing in 2026. And they needed a new driver to get behind the wheel, and they wanted to bring someone in with sponsorship and funding. And throughout the offseason, there was a lot of scrambling going on and a lot of rumblings on what Nick Sanchez was going to be doing. We thought maybe he'd be associated with the Spire Motorsports program and the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series if they brought their program, or might be associated with their truck program for 2026. Well, then AM Racing stuff started happening, and the Singer Performance Services team that was supposed to buy up the AM Racing team for 2026, that deal fell through just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that deal, they lost a lot of money on that deal. So then AM Racing and Nick Sanchez were scrambling, only for them to both find each other going into the year, and Nick Sanchez working with them as the main Ford driver for the 2026 season. This is going to be a solid opportunity for Nick Sanchez. I do think it is a slight downgrade from Big Machine Racing, where you don't have as many Fords going into the year, while Big Machine has support from ECR and Richard Childress Racing. Doesn't have that big support from the Ford camp going into 2026. Consider there will be at most 3 cars on the racetrack throughout the year. But I think for Ford long term, this could be a huge deal for Nick Sanchez. When I think of young NASCAR prospects, in my opinion, Nick Sanchez is one of the best young prospects we have in NASCAR currently at the moment. He won multiple races in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2024, winning the opener at Daytona, and then, of course, going to victory lane at Charlotte later in the year and almost making the championship 4. And then, of course, in 2025, went up to the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series and picked up Big Machine Racing's only 2nd victory ever. Their first one coming with Tyler Reddick at Texas. The 2nd one they ever got, which was at Atlanta Motor Speedway in the summer, where Parker nearly won a couple times. Now, what are the realistic expectations for Nick Sanchez going into 2026? Realistically, I think Nick Sanchez is going to be a factor for the chase this year. While he might not be as fast as what Harrison Burton did behind the wheel, who did really strong with the 25 car last year, I think Nick Sanchez is a really talented guy who can get the best out of equipment. You got a young driver replacing a former young driver in this team. I think Nick Sanchez, like I said, is going to have a pretty solid, and I'm pretty confident saying he will finish top 15 in points. I think he will be in that top 15 conversation throughout the year and throughout the season. And I think the pace and speed is really going to be there for him this year. I think he scores some top 5s and top 10s. He'll definitely do way better than Haley Deegan did behind the wheel of this team and program. Probably have a season very similar to Brett Moffitt, which Brett Moffitt had a pretty solid year in 2023. So my prediction is Nick Sanchez gets about 4 or 5 top 5s, maybe about 15 or 16 top 10s, and will be in conversation for the chase throughout the year. So you have guys like Corey Day, Brent Cruz, other people like Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Austin Hill, and others like Corey Day and Brent and other names like Roger Krug in the series. It's going to be a really strong field this year. Same with Carson Quaffle as well. But good for Nick to have a ride for 2026. We'll see what Nick Sanchez can do in the 2026 NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series here. We'll see what he can do with this team, and we'll see him perform very well. I do think Nick, though, could be in for a really strong and really good year with AM Racing. Hopefully, it can lead to potential success, as it could lead to him having a ride in a cup ride maybe down the road before, with a lot of drivers potentially being free agents as soon as well. And now we're going to head to on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Cletus McFarland. Now, we did a video talk about on the channel earlier today, but it was announced earlier today that Cletus McFarland is officially approved to run the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series opener at Daytona International Speedway. He will drive the number 4 truck for Nice Motorsports. He'll have Black Rifle Coffee Company as one of the major sponsors on the truck, and they'll have a number font tribute to Gray Biffle. All 4 drivers for Nice Motorsports will have those tributes throughout the event. Cletus in the 4, Travis Strana in the 42, Andres Prezzolora in the number 44, and then Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in the number 45. Obviously, as Matt Weaver had reported, it was pretty much a formality at this point. Now, Cletus did reveal in the video and the post on Instagram as well that he apparently had actually ran into the outside wall during his test, and he basically thought he wasn't going to get approved to run the Truck Series race at Daytona, but NASCAR said he was good to go to be approved, and he'll get the chance and opportunity to make his debut. This has been a big Archaic ride for Cletus McFarland at the start of his career. He also will have a pretty busy season in the NASCAR world and ARCA world this year, as Keys will also be racing in 4 or 5 ARCA Menard Series races with Rhett Jones Racing in 2026. He's going to run the ARCA opener at Daytona this upcoming Saturday, and then of course he's going to make some other starts, I believe, at Kansas. He's also working on doing some other stuff, maybe at Bristol later in the year. He's going to run at Michigan later this summer, and then he's also going to run at, I believe, Talladega this upcoming spring as well. So he's going to have a really busy schedule. I've also heard rumors that Cletus may be making more than just one start in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. Most likely those starts are coming at super speedways, but I would not throw out the possibility of him getting behind the wheel of the number 4 truck at Rockingham Speedway. It's already tested at the track, and since he has experience, I think it'd be a really tough challenge for him, but I think it'd be a track that I would love to see Cletus compete at to see his potential capabilities behind the wheel of a truck. And I think that this is a track you have to circle. Now, if he runs other races, I think you have to look at Talladega this fall. That'll be one race that'll be on his bucket list for 2026. And maybe he does back-to-back weeks and runs at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I think that is certainly a possibility. I do think the rating for the FS1 broadcast, and I kind of talked about this, I think it's going to be a huge number because you're going to have a lot of big people tuning in. And I look at the truck race in particular at Daytona. This is a very, very stacked truck field with a lot of really strong and really, really good talent. You got Tony Stewart in the 25 truck. He's my pick to win the Truck Series race at Daytona. You've got Ricky Stenhouse Jr. making his Truck Series debut in the 45. You got other big names like Travis Pastrana. You got Corey LaJoie, John Hunter Nemechek. You have Stuart Friesen back in trucks, Brendan Butterby Queen, Justin Haley. You got Minnie Tiro who's get a chance to race. You're going to have, again, Corey LaJoie of Henderson. You're going to have a lot of really strong and really fun competition in this race. And I think this Truck Series race, unfortunately, broadcast may not be as good, sadly, but I think for Cletus is a great opportunity to be in the Truck Series. And I'm glad to see he's been approved because I think while, yes, Cletus may not have the most experience behind the wheel, I certainly think he'll have a chance and opportunity to run really well with Nice. He's got to qualify his way in. And there could be issues with the rain potentially on Friday. We'll have to wait and see. But the good news is that the Nice trucks do have good speed, especially from qualifying. So if he can qualify, that won't be an issue. We'll see if he can make the field, but he'll attempt to make his truck debut. Glad to see Cletus is back in the Truck Series, and we'll see how he ends up doing with this team and with this program in the select race he gets in 2026. We'll see where things go for the upcoming year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Brad Keselowski. Now, I did a video covering a story on the channel yesterday, but it was finally officially confirmed from testing that Brad Keselowski is also officially cleared to run the 2026 Daytona 500. Brad Keselowski had a test yesterday at Charlotte Motor Speedway with doctors and physicians on standby just in case if they were there. But Brad Keselowski felt like after some of the x-rays that came out a couple weeks back, he felt like he was going to be okay to go to run the Daytona 500. But in a statement that he released yesterday, he said he didn't really know for sure if he'd be cleared and ready to go for the Daytona 500 this year. But he's cleared and he's really happy, and now is focused on trying to not only win the Daytona 500, but also win many more races and try to get his second NASCAR Cup Series championship and his first championship in 14 years. First of all, for this injury to heal as quick as it did, I think that number one is really, really impressive that the injury healed as quick as it did. But secondly, I am very happy to see that Brad Keselowski is officially approved to run the 2026 Daytona 500. And while they didn't announce anything on standby drivers, that's one question I have right now is who could be a potential standby driver just in case they're going to be needed for Brad Keselowski, because you have Chandler Swift in the 36 car for Front Row Motorsports. He'll be attempting to make his first Daytona 500 in his third try. And then, of course, you do have other drivers getting behind the wheel, like Corey LaJoie, who's driving a fourth car, who's a reserve driver, a standby driver, who, of course, did substitute for Brad Keselowski in the Cookout Clash at Bowman Gray Stadium very, very recently. But I think for Brad, that's the goal, is to get the distance and try to be very, very competitive. I think when it comes to injuries like this, I think there's going to be a lot of questions on how Brad is truly going to perform in the 2026 NASCAR Cup season, because you look at last year for Brad, the end of the year was really strong for the 6 team. Brad was super fast and really competitive, nearly won a few races. I remember Iowa in the summer when he had a really strong and really fast car in the race, but unfortunately lost a shot and opportunity to win because he lost some track position at the end of the race, but finished inside the top 5. Then I remember Phoenix, where he was up front, contending for the lead and contending for the victory, only to lose the race at the end because he unfortunately got caught up and basically went too high on the track, and Ryan Blaney and Kyle Larson stuck through and got by him at the end, and they all beat him at the start-finish line, and Brad nearly won the race, but Blaney came in and took the victory. But for Brad, I think the big thing is, can he start the year off on a strong note, and will the leg injury affect him? I will say there's a lot of people thinking that Brad is going to make the chase this year. And while I think there's a lot of really understandable optimism for Brad to make the chase in 2026, I'm just not entirely sure if he in fact will make the chase this year, because I'm not sure if he will be fully healed at this point. I think there's still going to be some of that healing process going on for Brad. And you have to remind her, yes, I know Brad did have an injury many years ago back in 2011, but Brad Keselowski at the time was 27 years old. Brad Keselowski is 41 and will turn 42 in the next couple days. So I think that's one thing, if you're a Brad Keselowski fan, you have to look at this point. But I think Brad, this is really the last big race that Brad Keselowski really needs to win, is the Daytona 500. The Daytona 500 is the biggest race every year. Brad's won the Coke 600, he's won the Brickyard 400, and he's won the Southern 500. So Brad wants to check it off his bucket list and also snap the winless streak that goes back to Darlington in the spring of 2024. And with the speed that I think RFK Racing could potentially have in 2026, I think that we could be in for a really good year because the system is going to benefit them. That's why I have Kyle Busch making the chase this year over Brad Keselowski, though, is because I'm a little worried about that. But I think his teammates, Chris Buescher, Ryan Preece, who just won the Clash recently, I think that you're looking at those two guys to be really good. Now, again, I think Brad by the end of the year will have great pace and speed. I just think, like I said, it's going to take a little time for Brad to get up to speed, get back to being used to these cars, because, again, he got injured, is still trying to get back on his feet and be ready to go for the event. But, again, the most important thing is Brad is officially cleared to run the Daytona 500 this year. Did, I think, a test very similar to what Stuart Friesen did, who also is cleared to run the truck race at Daytona in a couple of nights. Very happy to see this. And, again, once again, good to see Brad is officially cleared to run the Daytona 500. We'll see how Brad ends up doing. We'll see if he can show some competitive pace and speed. I think Brad will have probably a pretty fast car. The question is, how it will be throughout the year. We'll see how Brad ends up doing throughout the 2026 NASCAR season and show pace and speed. But good to see he's officially cleared to run the Daytona 500 in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch and Tyler Reddick. Now, We already talked about the fact that Kyle Busch will be driving in select races in the Craftsman Truck Series for Spire Motorsports in 2026. And there's already beginning to be a lot of talk at this point early in the year, even though we've not had a regular season race at this point. There's already beginning a lot of talk and a lot of conversation about Kyle Busch potentially leaving Richard Childress Racing at the end of 2026. And the big question is, if Kyle Busch does in fact leave Richard Childress Racing at the end of 2026, the big question is, where will Kyle Busch end up going in 2027? Insert Spire Motorsports. In a preview video that Jordan Bianchi and Jeff Gluck did on The Athletic, about an hour and I believe 10 minutes in the show, they started talking about and previewing Spire Motorsports. And they got up to talking about Daniel Suarez. Daniel Suarez, we all know, is on a one-year contract with Spire Motorsports going into 2026. And what they say is that if Daniel Suarez does not have a good season and underwhelms throughout 2026, Spire Motorsports will be looking to pick up different drivers and looking at someone else to get behind the wheel of 2026. The obvious big name is Kyle Busch, but the other name that's associated with that is actually Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick being in association with Spire, this is not the first time that we have heard Tyler Reddick's name associated with Spire. Let's go back to last year really quick. When the lawsuit was going on between NASCAR and 25 Racing in Front Row, one of the big rumors that was going on was the fact that basically they could not get a deal figured out for Tyler Reddick because sponsorship was leaving the team. There was a lot of talk that Spire Motorsports could potentially have gotten a loaned out Tyler Reddick for a year to drive the number 7 car instead of Daniel Suarez, who would have gotten behind the wheel maybe down the road. But Tyler Reddick's name has been associated with Spire Motorsports before. Now, Tyler Reddick being a free agent is definitely a big surprise, but the big reason for that is because there's been some sponsorship issues. If you notice, Monster Energy, which is a big backer of the 25 Racing team in the past, they no longer fully have true association at the time right now. They're not really fully funding the team and organization currently at the moment. They're sponsoring Riley Yards, but are not on Tyler Reddick's car, especially with the Palo Casino car we'll talk about later this week. They're not really associated with the team right now going into 26. But if you're Spire Motorsports, you look at Tyler Reddick, you might want to go after him at this point. But my prediction is that even though Tyler Reddick is technically a free agent going into 2026, I think Reddick is going to sign an extension. It would be foolish for 25 Racing to lose Tyler Reddick. Yes, he did not win a race in 2025. That is true. But Tyler Reddick is an exceptional and really, really good talent. And it would make no sense at this point for a team and an organization to give up on a driver as talented as Tyler Reddick, who almost won the championship just 2 years ago back in 2024. And I think could really benefit from this new championship format in 2026. So I think Reddick more than likely, well, yes, he is technically a free agent at this point and won't be the only driver that's in the running for the 7. I think another name you have to look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who I think is going to be running for both the 7 and 71 if he doesn't return to Hayek Motorsports, or if Michael O'Dowd, let's just say, leaves the team at the end of the year, because he's in a contract year, from my understanding, with Spire Motorsports. But the big obvious reason you clicked on this video, Kyle Busch. We've talked about Kyle Busch a lot on this channel in his future and potential plans in NASCAR after 2026. Kyle Busch going into this year is in a contract year. And he talked about this at Bob Pockets very recently as well. One thing he did say is he will know what he'll be doing in 2027, or what he'll be looking to do by the time we get to the Coca-Cola 600 and we get to the Charlotte weekend. Keep in mind, the Charlotte weekend is only about 3 months away at this point, and I think it's all going to depend on how the performance is from Richard Childress Racing. Obviously, Richard Childress Racing is a team that I feel like has been kind of struggling over the course of the last couple of years and last couple of seasons. And Kyle Busch is on a very long winless streak with the SEMA program, to the point now where they have a new crew chief coming in to work with Kyle Busch in 2026. That crew chief is going to be Jim Pullman. Now, they did show some good speed at the Clash for their standards, but they fell off throughout the event, and they fell behind a lot of teams and organizations in the race. So I think for Kyle Busch at this point, if the performance is not good and it's very similar or even worse, I think Kyle Busch will be looking to go to a new team. And I think Spire Motorsports could be one of the likely landing spots. But I talk about the Hendrick car sponsorship. You have the 48 car for Alex Bowman that it might be available. Alex Bowman is also in a contract year. Now, I think there is a very good chance that Alex Bowman will sign an extension with Hendrick Motorsports. I think you have a younger driver in the team and program. He's not the most flashy guy, but he's been the best fourth driver Hendrick Motorsports has ever had since they've gone to 4 cars back in 2002. So I don't think it would make the most sense at this point to get rid of Bowman. But If Bowman has an underwhelming season, maybe then at that point you go and look at Kyle Busch. I think that would be the best opportunity to be looking at Kyle for the 48, and maybe have Kyle Busch in a stopgap year or two in the 48 car to get Corey Day or Roger Crew prepared, because Kyle Busch in 2027 is going to be 42 years old and will be getting up to his mid-40s. If they can have him for a couple years with the Ally sponsorship, he'll be 43 or 44. At that point, Brexton, I believe, will be around 13 or 14 and not far away from getting into NASCAR, because Kyle Busch has talked about wanting to share a ride with Brexton in the Truck Series in the next few years. So maybe Kyle Busch goes over to Hendrick for a few years and maybe lets those guys develop their stuff. But then I think about the 7 car for Spire Motorsports. This is one that I'm circling for Kyle right now. Daniel Suarez, like I mentioned, is in a contract year with Spire, and I know he hasn't really made a start. He did look good at the Clash, but I'm not sure the performance is going to be there for Suarez to keep that seat long term. Even if he has a decent year, I'm just not sure if Daniel Suarez is going to have a phenomenal year with this team and program. So I'm hoping for Suarez he can have a good year so he can stay long term. But at this point right now, I got a feeling that Suarez will be one of the many drivers playing the musical chairs throughout the year, and it's maybe his last opportunity. We'll see how he does throughout the year. But again, I'm looking at that number 7 car for Kyle Busch right now. I think that's the most likely landing opportunity for Kyle Busch and Cup, and we'll see if that ends up happening in the 2027 season for Kyle Busch. So that's for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go to below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. You think Kyle Busch could end up over at Spire Motorsports in 27 or Tyler Reddick? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you happy to see both Cletus and Brad approved for the races at Daytona? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If any major NASCAR news breaks later today, we'll discuss it live on the channel. Tomorrow morning on the channel, we're going to have another NASCAR news video talk about all the news I didn't talk about in the first video today. And of course, we'll have reactions to the duels as well. We're going to have reactions to Daytona Fighter qualifying later tonight as well. And of course, reactions to the dual races. Friday, not exactly sure what's going to go out. Maybe some news content and some news that might end up getting announced. And of course, we'll have reactions to the Truck Series race. And then Saturday, Sunday, reactions to the weekend. And then Monday or Tuesday, whenever we get to the point, we'll probably have news content dropping. Got a lot of content coming up. People like Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisberg, and Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubbles, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Crease, Sam Air, Frankie Midas, Cletus, Brown, Dodge, Ram, Brad Keselowski, Ryan Preece, Connor Rizos, Jr. Motorsports, Daniel Suarez, Tony Stewart, Casey Kane, Will Brown, Buffett, Cam Waters, Brian Vickers, Gray Biffle, all the good stuff we'll talk about on the channel in the coming days, weeks, small. And you'll also probably see a Daytona Fire paint scheme video actually dropping Friday, so expect to see that soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.